You are sleeping in a stranger's house. That is what Airbnb is. You can dress it up with professional photographs and 5-star reviews and a welcome basket on the kitchen counter. But the fundamental transaction is this. You are paying to be unconscious in a space controlled by someone you have never met. You don't know what's behind the walls. You don't know what's in the closets. You don't know if every room in the listing is the only room in the building, or if there are spaces that don't appear in the photographs. Spaces with their own doors and their own occupants. These are 3 true stories from people who booked a place to stay and found more than what was listed. My partner and I booked a cabin in the Smoky Mountains for a long weekend. The listing was perfect. Secluded, surrounded by trees, a hot tub on the deck, a fireplace. The photograph showed exactly what you'd want from a mountain getaway. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Lockbox code worked. The cabin was clean. Everything matched the listing. There was a guest book on the kitchen table, a thick leather-bound notebook where previous guests had written notes about their stay, recommendations for restaurants, comments about the view, the kind of thing hosts leave to create a sense of community. We unpacked, made dinner, sat on the deck and watched the sun go down behind the mountains, and by 9 p.m. we were settled in and content. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not for any particular reason. I'm a light sleeper in unfamiliar places. I got up around 1 a.m. and wandered the cabin, kitchen, living room, the small hallway that led to the bathroom. In the hallway, there was a bookshelf built into the wall, a few novels, a field guide to local birds, a stack of board games, and at the bottom, partially hidden behind a box of playing cards, another notebook. Same style as the guest book on the kitchen table, leather-bound, similar size. I assumed it was an older version, maybe the first guest book that had been filled and replaced. I opened it. It was not a guest book. It was a log. Entries written in the same handwriting. The host's handwriting, presumably. Dates going back about 2 years. Each entry was brief. A date, a description of the guests, and notes. The notes were detailed. What time the guests arrived, what they ate for dinner, described specifically enough that the writer had been watching. By the time they went to bed, what time the lights went out, whether they used the hot tub, whether they locked the doors, whether they checked the closets. The last detail appeared in almost every entry, a simple notation. Checked closets. Yes, no. Most entries said no. A few said yes. The entries where guests checked the closets had a different notation after them. Early departure. I woke my partner. I showed her the notebook. We packed in under 10 minutes and drove to a hotel in Gatlinburg. I reported it to Airbnb. I sent photographs of the notebook entries. They removed the listing within a week. I don't know what was in the closets. I didn't check them. And I've decided I'm comfortable not knowing. But I think about the notation. Checked closets, yes, no. I think about what it implies. That the host knew from observation whether guests had opened the closet doors. Which means the host was watching closely enough to see that specific action. From where I don't know. The cabin had no visible cameras, but the notebook had 2 years of entries. 2 years of watching. I booked a 1-bedroom apartment in Prague for a week. I was traveling alone. The listing described a living room, a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. 4 rooms. The photograph showed all 4. Clean, modern, and well lit. I arrived mid-afternoon. The host had left the key with a neighbor. I let myself in. The apartment was exactly as photographed, small but well maintained. I unpacked, walked around the neighborhood, had dinner, and came back around 9 p.m. When I returned, I noticed something I'd missed during my initial walkthrough. In the bedroom, behind the wardrobe, there was a door. Not hidden exactly, but positioned so the wardrobe obscured most of it. If you stood at the bedroom entrance, you wouldn't see it. You had to walk past the bed and look behind the furniture. The door was painted the same color as the wall. It had a handle, a simple lever handle, and it was unlocked. I opened it. Behind the door was a room. A fifth room, not in the listing, not in the photographs, not in the floor plan sketch the host had included in the welcome message. The room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. No windows, one light fixture on the ceiling, a bare bulb that worked when I pulled the cord. The walls were bare drywall, the floor was concrete. In the room, there was a chair. A folding metal chair positioned in the center of the room, facing the door I'd just opened. Nothing else. No furniture, no storage, no purpose I could identify. Just an empty room with a single chair facing the door to the bedroom where I was supposed to sleep. I closed the door, I pushed the wardrobe flush against it, and I slept with the lights on. The next morning, I messaged the host. I said, "There's a room behind the wardrobe that isn't in the listing, what is it?" The response came 4 hours later. "Storage room. Sorry, should have mentioned. It's empty." It was not empty. It had a chair. I moved to a hotel that afternoon. I left a review describing the unlisted room. The review was removed by Airbnb for not meeting community guidelines. I appealed, and the appeal was denied. The listing is still active. I checked last month. The photographs still show 4 rooms. The room behind the wardrobe is not mentioned. I don't know who put the chair there. I don't know what the chair was for. I don't know if someone sits in that chair when the bedroom is occupied and listens through a wall that's nothing but drywall and paint. But a room with no windows, no purpose, and a single chair facing a bedroom door is not storage. And anyone who describes it as storage knows exactly what it is, and is choosing to call it something else. I should have cancelled when I pulled into the driveway. The listing was a private room in a shared home, meaning the host lived in the house and I was renting a bedroom. I'd done this before in other cities. Usually it's fine, you meet the host, they show you the room, you have separate schedules and barely interact. This house was in rural Vermont, late October. I was there for a work conference 40 minutes away and the hotel options near the venue were sold out. The listing was affordable and had decent reviews. Mostly short stays, 1 or 2 nights, professional travelers like me. The house was old. Not charmingly old, structurally old. The kind of old where the foundation has opinions about the weather and the stairs have a lean that isn't architectural. It sat alone on a large lot with no neighbors visible in any direction. I knocked. No answer. I checked the Airbnb messages. The host had sent instructions saying the door was unlocked and my room was upstairs. Second door on the right. He said he might be out when I arrived. I went in, and the house was quiet. I found my room. It was acceptable. Clean bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the backyard. I put down my bag and went to the bathroom across the hall. And this is when I noticed the first thing. The bathroom had a lock, a simple push-button lock in the doorknob. But the strike plate on the frame had been removed. The lock could engage, but it wouldn't catch. The door could be pushed open from the outside, regardless of whether the lock was turned. I told myself it was old hardware, maintenance that hadn't been done. I went downstairs to the kitchen to get water. The kitchen was lived in, dishes in the sink, mail on the counter, a jacket draped over a chair, normal signs of habitation. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, there was a small printed schedule. It was a grid. Days of the week across the top, times down the side. In some of the cells, there were initials. I looked more closely. The initials corresponded to guest names from the Airbnb reviews. I recognized two of them, names from reviews I'd read before booking. The initials were written in the time slots that corresponded to check-in dates. It was a schedule of guests, organized by when they would be in the house, and for how long. This by itself is not alarming. Hosts track bookings, it's normal. What was not normal was the column on the far right. A column with no header. In this column, next to each set of initials, there were check marks. Not all of them, maybe 60%. Some initials had check mark, and some didn't. I looked for my initials, my stay, current date. There was a check mark next to my name. Already, I had been in the house for less than 20 minutes. I went back upstairs, I opened my room door, I looked at the room, really looked at it for the first time. The smoke detector on the ceiling was positioned directly above the bed. I stood on the mattress and examined it. It was a functioning smoke detector. But next to the sensor, there was a small circular lens that was not part of the manufacturer's design. I took out my phone. I opened the network scanner app I use for work. I'm in IT. I scanned the local network. The house had a Wi-Fi network. Connected to that network were 14 devices. 14. In a house occupied by one man. I identified the devices I could. A router, a laptop, a phone, a smart TV. That accounted for 4. The remaining 10 were unidentified, small devices, IoT devices, the kind of devices that have tiny processors, tiny storage, and tiny lenses. I picked up my bag. I walked downstairs. I walked out the front door, and I got in my car. As I was pulling out of the driveway, a car pulled in behind me, an older sedan, a man in the driver's seat. The host, arriving home at the exact moment I was leaving. He rolled down his window. He was smiling. Just getting in? I was out grabbing dinner. He wasn't out grabbing dinner. The kitchen had fresh dishes in the sink. The jacket on the chair was warm. He had been in the house the entire time I was there. The second door on the right, my room, was upstairs. The first door on the right was closed. I had not opened it. I had not checked what was behind it. But standing in the driveway looking up at the house, I could count the windows. The first door on the right corresponded to a room with no window. An interior room. No window. First door on the right, directly next to my bedroom, with a wall between us that could have been anything. Solid, hollow, or something else entirely. I drove to the conference venue and slept in my car. I reported the listing to Airbnb with photographs of the smoke detector, the schedule, and the network scan. And the listing was removed 2 weeks later. The host sent me one message after my report. It said, "You didn't have to leave. I was looking forward to meeting you." I've stayed in hotels exclusively since then. I pay more. I don't care. The lock on my hotel room works. I've checked. If you're booking a rental, any rental. Scan the Wi-Fi network when you arrive. Check the smoke detectors, check behind the furniture. And if a lock doesn't catch, leave. It's not a maintenance issue. It's a design choice. If you have a story, the link is in the description. Subscribe if you're new. New stories every Tuesday and Friday.